you raised a very interesting topic about Australian economics now. So would you like to talk about it today?
Yeah, sure. There was a research report out yesterday, as we were talking about, Ek, by SocGen, that was actually saying that they think that the Australian economy now is really in trouble, and the Australian dollar as well. And they cited two reasons for this. One is that they said the Australian economy was just so leveraged now because there's so much consumer borrowing, primarily in the housing sector, and that's really become a bubble over the last few years, and it's got completely out of control. Australia now has the highest level of consumer borrowing anywhere in the world. So a lot of people don't realise that.
From the beginning of this year until now, or
no, I mean this is a trend that's been going on quite a long time. This is a long-established trend, and Australian consumer borrowing it basically overtook the US in the mid-2000s, and whilst US consumers have been deleveraging over the last few years, Australian consumers have just been getting heavier and heavier into debt. So we've now got the most indebted consumer of anywhere in the world, and that's primarily gone into the housing sector. All that debt has been funneled into the housing sector, so it's created a property bubble similar to what we saw in the States again about 5 or 6 years ago. Exactly, it really started to unravel in the States, maybe about 2007, 2008. That's when it really started to unravel. In Australia, that hasn't really happened. Prices have come down slightly, but maybe something like 10% as opposed to 30% in the States, and maybe a little bit more in some parts of the UK. So it hasn't really adjusted in the same way. And I think the second thing that worried SocGen was that we're now starting to see signs of a real slowing in terms of Chinese demand for Australian resources. Obviously, China's been the biggest buyer of the Australian resources and minerals, and now that's really starting to deteriorate. And so they're predicting a very, very hard landing for Australia. This is something that we've been saying for quite a time. Was very much on the cards. We're worried about the Australian economy. We think the dollar's going to fall. But I think that what's interesting is that maybe there's another way of looking at this, which is that instead of just seeing it as being Australia in trouble, is there a bigger picture here? Is this maybe an indicator of actually what's happening in China? Are we going to actually see Australia acting as an early warning sign for problems within Australia? In the old days, hundreds of years ago, when people used to go down under the ground and work in coal mines, they used to take a canary, a small bird, in a cage with them, and the idea would be that if there was any gas that had leaked in the coal mine, any poisonous gas, it would kill the bird, and people would know because the bird would be much more sensitive, and that was kind of an early warning sign. At that point, miners would rush up out of the coal mine, get back above ground, and try and stay alive. And maybe Australia is kind of a canary for what's actually going on with the Chinese economy. Maybe it's actually a very good indicator of some of the problems that lie ahead.
So, what are the problems that you see in China now, in terms of the intertrade, or in terms of the like demand of the Chinese people and things like that?
Well, I think I think that's exactly it. I think that there's a real structural problem in China that China is still. It's a fixed asset investment driven economy. China has generated so much more monetary base expansion. It's got the PBOC, the central bank in China, has now got a balance sheet that's risen over $3 trillion, probably going to be heading towards $4 trillion maybe before this year's out, and a lot of people are predicting that the PBOC's balance sheet is going to exceed $5 trillion pretty soon. And it's very difficult to know because the data that we get on the PBOC's balance sheet and what it's made up of, it's very limited. So, but clearly, China has been expanding its monetary base. Everybody talks about, QE1 and QE2 in the States. Everybody talks about the LTRO 1 and 2 in Europe. But, that's really a drop in the ocean compared to what we've seen in China. If you look at the Fed's balance sheet, it's expanded to somewhere, north of $1 trillion now. If you look at the ECB, it's the same sort of region. If you look at China, it's already maybe 3 times either of those, and growing and growing every single day. So there's a real problem in China that all of this expansion in the monetary base has had to go somewhere.